Hi everyone. I have a really special video today for this next presentation. It's a quantum reversal of Aliens Will Meet Us, and I posted the forward version on Dailymotion about 3 years ago. I will leave a link at the end of this video. When I started doing this quantum reversal, I almost gave up because it didn't seem to be revealing the hidden messages the way I thought it should be. So I prayed and meditated a bit and came back to it the next day, and some miraculous things started to come out in it. In the beginning, it's still a bit fuzzy, but as I moved forward, it became clearer and clearer, and I believe it is one of the best so far. I recommend you watch the version on Dailymotion that shows Victor talking to Anthony when he was about 10 or 11 years old and sitting on his shoulder. You'll be able to see the difference between this one and that one when you do. Like his other quantum reversals, there is a multitude of prophecy and definite amount of content that confirms many other translations that were not as clear. Linda and I are very excited about this one. It inspires us to continue on with the many more we have waiting. We are just beginning to touch the surface of what is to come. In presentation 4, Victor talked much about prophecy and what this means to the future of humanity. In this one, he begins to give us a more detailed description of what is going to happen. I also talked before on how some of the forward recordings and quantum reversals may change once they are retranscribed, and this one is a good example of that. I'm beginning to understand how the wave files lead by their nature in the quantum world, and how they can take different paths to reach their destination. This means the captions may slightly change, depending on where they were cut and reversed and how close they relate to the correct timing at which they were meant to be heard. As a result, there are several factors that can get me a better and clearer transcription. They are as follows. One of the main factors is the amount of time and effort I put into the translations, as well as the number of times I've done them. It often seems the more I do them, the better they become and the clearer the speech is. The second is the timing, or the time that the translation is best suited to be revealed. This is also important. For example, if I do a transcription that was meant to reveal something at a particular time in the future, and that time has not yet come, then the audio will be a bit fuzzier, and they will only communicate what they need to. However, they may give me enough at that time to keep my interest and teach me something else they needed at that time. The third, if there is something in the transcription that does not make sense or contradicts what I have heard in the past from them, then I know it needs to be looked at again. Number 4, I've always been thinking of what God and the angels are trying to teach me and others while I'm doing the transcriptions. There will be times when evil tries to filter its way into the recording, so I have to be wary of that and block it out when it happens. Most of the time it is just a subtle error that can cause an entire paragraph to change in the message that God wants to teach us. Number 5, I also have to understand that currently there are not enough people observing what is happening here to reveal some of the more miraculous things that lie ahead, and there is a process that they are taking the few people that come here through so they can have a better understanding. And finally, number 6, as I mentioned before, when a wave, phrase, or sentence is cut, then copied and reversed, it will take some of the properties of the other, similar to the way particles do when they are entangled in the quantum world. So if the captions have changed in the new versions, and you are looking in my older video to see if the audio is different than it was in the new versions, you'll be out of luck. No matter where they are or how long they've been published, even if the wave file may sound different with the newly revised captions, the audio will remain the same in the new as well as all the previous versions. So this next video of Victor's is quite a long one. It has 31 parts. That is 31 forward parts and 31 reverse parts, what makes it in itself about 12 minutes long. After my commentaries, it'll be too long for one video, so I'm going to have to break it down into 2 presentations. There are some remarkable things happening in this first presentation. However, the second one from this video has some extremely important information and revelations. We believe it is one of the clearest quantum reversals so far, so I hope you spend some time on it. In part 1, he starts off telling everyone the reason he is talking is serious and how they will be giving prophecy that can help change the world. So in part 1 he says, in the forward mode, I'm telling you, our record is that I'm talking straight at them so they can tell the reason is serious. In reverse he says, we'll give them the antidotes from our prophecy while giving every answer. When Victor says he is talking straight at them, I believe he's trying to convey to the few that are now watching how God and the angels are answering questions that they may have. In part 2, he says, and a lot of the future too can yield the facts in the things that he picks up. I can talk just a tad. And in the reverse he says, and this time will give them some prophecy and lessons. They've got to believe the history. In the past, most of the divine lessons were contained in the dream transcriptions, many of which were backed up by future events already. Yet there was much that came to me personally in these lessons that needed to be confirmed as well. I believe that many of these previous lessons that came during the dream transcriptions are going to be confirmed again, so others will be able to hear much of what I've already been told. So Victor talks about how these lessons will yield some facts in the future. You'll also notice how Victor, my son, and I are all exchanging our thoughts in reverse as we speak throughout the entire video. So in part 3 he says, do you think I could talk faster with a broken heart? Do they know our Earth isn't that sure of its survival? The word survival was kind of faint at the very end. When I heard that Victor said he had a broken heart, it was very emotional for me, realizing how worried he was about our future and how it affects people who are doubting that humanity will be protected in the future. In the verse he says, or actually I say, and this is the time to ensure we have cognition in here. Then Victor continues on, for the formula God will show Ryan, and somehow will give it in the reverse rifts of time. In a previous video, Victor also spoke about the formula of God. I have no idea yet what he means by this formula, unless it is in the plan that he'll be talking about soon. It was also interesting how he talks about the reverse rifts of time. Could we be talking about some kind of time travel here? Soon we may find out. I know there may be some things here that I've considered about the quantum world, and I may be wrong about. Hopefully the angels will tell me when I'm right and when I'm not. In part 4, after he says, in the reverse rifts of time, he says, good ideals are without collusion. In a way, you do know you need to hope and believe in God, and He'll be helping for sure. You'll have use for the symmetry provided by the angels. If you still can listen, we'll be honored. I don't think I really heard the word collusion until Victor mentioned it in this video almost 20 years ago. When he talked about how good ideals are without collusion, that reminded me of how some governments are colluding with the oil companies without any thought about how it affects our future. So it is interesting, some of the things happening with President Trump relates to what Victor is saying about avoiding the responsibilities of providing a better world for our children. It's very hard to tell what the truth is these days, and it isn't getting any better. That's why I believe that this is the right time for this video to come out in its entirety. A couple of things that come to mind are how some countries exited the Paris climate change agreement and how some world leaders won't even acknowledge that global warming is really happening. So now you can listen to parts 1 to 4 of this video.
Now stop it, he said. Hey, I think you're saying something bad there, Victor. You're not supposed to say that.
What did you say? Yes.
Yes, it's so funny. Right bad. Wasn't it? Shoot the head. We'll play it back on the TV.
In part 5, Victor says, in the forward mode, with a lot of people, honor will be back. Tell them that God, he took a look and knows better. In reverse, he says, so everyone cannot forget. And then I say that this is real stuff. And then Victor continues with, are you up to the challenge? That's for you. So if you don't like it, and then the next part goes into the reverse of part 6, those here will never forget. So he talks about how the purpose of this project seems to be eluding many who come. He predicts that during the time that this transcript is being done, the majority watching will still be reluctant to get involved. However, he does say that God has looked into the future and knows that there will be a time that more people will understand and respect it. Whether this is during my lifetime, I'm not sure. But even if what we are doing here helps humanity in any way in the future, I'll be happy. I know that many of the most important discoveries were seriously shunned during the initial stages, to later become very important for human evolution. Suppression, corruption, and collusion play a major role these days in the spiritual evolution of humanity, and we may be stuck in a rut that we can't get out of very soon. It seems that changes only happen when enough people are ready to become part of learning and disclosing the truth. This usually happens when our options are limited and we finally allow ourselves to accept the truth. He challenges the people to remember what they see and hear during this journey. Even if they don't like it, it should still be in the back of our minds to consider. In part 6, in the forward mode, he says, I'd like to talk about your future before it's on the plate of a company and eaten. And in reverse, he says, humanity needs to find a new vision that we can put in motion for God. And then I say, it will get us up, and Betty finishes with, to heaven. The reason that some can hear it is because they're spiritual. Do you hear it? It is interesting how he also mentions how what we often see as reality can be construed by the big companies, and if we continue to let it happen, it will affect the world through unregulated overconsumption of natural resources. He then challenges us to have a better vision for humanity's future, which in turn would affect the future of the eternal soul. Lastly, he makes reference to the people that wonder why they cannot hear some of these things that I and others do. Victor clearly states that if you are not spiritual enough, you'll probably not be able to hear it. So now you can hear parts 5 and 6.
Sounds funny.
He goes, tell him, ha ha ha.
You're a good boy today, Victor. Very good boy today. How's Betty doing today?
So in part 7 he says, in the forward mode, yes, we'd like to just ignore him here. The future's Earth needs a miracle. It looks like it's a bird. In reverse he says, there are many lessons that we need to give Ryan for a new vision. And then Anthony in reverse says, all that he learned really is actually a setup for this new mission. So in that last part where Anthony starts to talk and Victor says we'd like to ignore him here, he is using it as an example of how some may want to ignore their children when they start asking questions about the future and what we are doing in this generation to make sure it's good for them too. Then he says the earth needs a miracle and it looks like it's a bird. In the reverse part, he talked about the many lessons he needed to give me for a better vision of the future as well. Lastly, Anthony said in reverse that everything I learned was to prepare me for this new mission. Perhaps I'm not really sure what my mission is yet, because he uses the word new. Is this something that I'm going to find out later? In part 8 he says, in the forward mode, take a look. Can you fake this? You can't. You'll get action at the library if you tell it firsthand. In the reverse he says that some legend will come from the east for you. He'll assist if you follow him. By the way, if you watch the video, you'll see my son Anthony drawing something while Victor is on his shoulder. That scratching sound you hear in the background is him coloring his picture. So in the last part, Victor was talking about humanity's future, which in a way is our children. As it goes, Anthony said something, and he says that we would like to ignore him, or perhaps he meant ignore their future, and that their future needs a miracle. Then he clearly says that this miracle from God is a bird. After that, he talks about the many lessons which a group of us witnessed in the beginning when I was doing dream transcriptions. These lessons were quite incredible, and the angels named them the indoctrination, which was my indoctrination into this religion. It lasted for several years, and during that time they gave me the religious pseudonym Adam Cadman, which we'll hear more about later. Then he mentions how all these lessons were setting me up for the mission that was about to come. Keep in mind that Victor talked about all these things more than 10 years before they happened. He also says that these transcriptions and quantum reversals that I'm doing now would be impossible to fake. You may be able to fake pictures and videos, but you cannot fake the fact that angels are communicating in reverse. The next sentence or two confuses me a bit when he starts talking about getting action at a library and meeting a legend from the east that will assist me. There is something about it that even eludes me right now. So now you can hear part 7 and part 8.
He goes, I say to play pick up Penny, I can't talk.
In part 9, Victor says, why would you want to tell the readers a tariff will affect some that didn't register? All of a sudden, you will seem aggressive. Obviously, the reason we must help them if they're registering is we're here to help who we know. I'm glad that I'm only going up to part 16 in this, as It's so long. Keep in mind that while I comment, I may be getting ahead of some of the things Victor will be talking about, but I'm sure it will all work out in the end. When Victor talked about a tariff, I believe he's answering the question that some may have about why this is open to everyone, even those who do not register. So his answer, I think, is that God doesn't put a tariff on how long it takes us to decide if we want to believe something or not. And I do not want to seem like I'm being aggressive by saying that people must register to observe this event. Sure, it's nice to have people register and participate, and they will know when the time is right. When they do, we will be here to help answer the questions they may have. In part 10, Victor says, and if they search for help from the right person, they'll take part and opened up. The trust that will be earned is only tomorrow and simple, okay? It's simple because we all need this help to find truth. If you ask for help, God will know you're having a certain challenge, allowing stress in your life. So again, he talked about getting help, and when they do, it will encourage others to participate. One of the things we have been told from the beginning is that if you need help from God and His angels, all you have to do is ask, and He will provide you with the answers. Whether that be in a dream or a vision or in a transcription here, those interested in this will get their answers. When you do, you will experience a personal relationship with God that you never thought was possible. The angels will often even call you by your first name and tell you something about yourself or your family that you would only know. Some will even get in contact with past loved ones. These are just a few of the examples of the things that will come. And when the answers do come, you'll often be able to see them here with captioned audio. Now you can listen to part 9 and 10. So in part 11 he says, I've got some real news events you're not going to be afraid of that carefully will challenge life. And we felt this project in a way was obstructed then by evil. www.budgieresearch.homestead.com, Ryan's old website. The world's first bird to start connecting at that time. In reverse he says, in time, Ryan will approach the world with this formula that moves them. All of us eventually have seized the right of intervention. He believed us. We know he found this, and this is real. In the last part, Victor says he wants you to be aware of the first time in history that a budgie started communicating with God and the angel was with me. Really was an incredible event, and hundreds, if not thousands, were quite interested at the time. He also mentions my old website, www.budgieresearch.homestead.com, where I began posting his recordings and videos, and how it became corrupted after I crashed the Homestead server I was hosted on, when I was on Coast to Coast Radio Network a couple of times. Shortly after I crashed the server, I think they decided to corrupt the site because they couldn't manage the traffic it was getting, and I had to close it down. It's funny how Victor called it my old website, because I have had many since his death, and that was the one I was working on when he was alive. So he predicted it would happen about 8 years after his death. I also had my own file server site that had many of Victor's recordings and videos on. During the time, I had it running for a little over a year, and it constantly had 10 to 20 people downloading the recordings at the same time, and finished with about 2 million downloads. It too crashed, and I couldn't get it back up and running again. So now you can hear the next part of the recording.
antidotes.com.
In part 13, in the forward mode, Victor says, "In the bricks of time, some might mock him. They'll talk of that affair after." In reverse, he says, "We are backing the notion of Ryan's quantum thoughts on dimensions when we dream." In part 14, I only speak, and the reverse of what I say is, "Offset emotions are always hard. Relief is now easily available here as wanted, helping." Yes, he may have just given us another clue about time and called it the bricks of time. I'd also like to thank the angels for saying that they back me on my quantum ideas on dreams. I think I mentioned somewhere that dreams are just another part of the metaphysical and the quantum world, and they are all interconnected. In part 14, I was only talking, so I did not need to translate the forward speech. Most of the time, it was just encouragement for Victor anyway, and you are probably not that interested in what I said. It seems all the interesting things I say come in reverse. I know I still sound a bit funny in forward speech because I have a temporary tooth in until I get it properly replaced in the new year when I can afford it. I have to take it out every time I eat, and half the time I forget to put it back in. When Victor talks about relief being here, I think he's setting us up for the final two segments of this video, where he uses his incredible sense of humor to crack another one of his corny but funny jokes. Even now, whenever I'm down, all I have to do is to listen to one of his recordings, and it brings me back up to where I should be. Now you can hear the next two parts of the video.
Good boy. You don't bite hard. Good boy. People see you on TV, they're going to say, "Oh, Victor's so beautiful." Oh, it's another TV. Now we so be.
Finally, the last two parts of the video of this is 15 and 16. In the forward, Anthony talks, and then Victor laughs and says, "Anthony dreams too." And then I say, "I call it passion," in reverse. In reverse, Victor says, "And you are reversed," and then Anthony finishes, "In our help hearing this part in reality. We've got to use it. I will happily use it." And Victor says, "Have a really good life." In part 16 of the forward mode, Victor laughs and says, "I must be drinking some. There's a beer in front of me. Because my laugh is a bit spooky, I got to turn it to a fart." In reverse, he says, "The progress Ryan has seen is a miracle. He'll know that there's a reason, because he's doing it so much better." So Victor starts off saying that Anthony dreams too, as he refers to his previous comments. Over the years, I got used to hearing Victor laugh. He really had one of the most hilarious laughs I ever heard. He chuckled as well, and usually when he did, he was planning something funny, or he just thought of something funny to say. Back then, after a hard day's work, I'd come home, relax a bit, grab a beer, put it in a glass, and go to the computer to work on Victor's recordings. We spent hundreds of hours together, and during that time he was either on my shoulder watching what I was doing, or beside me on the computer table where I set my beer glass. He was fascinated by the foam on the beer, and I would catch him off and taking a nip or two. I think it helped clear his throat for talking. He never took too much that it affected his judgment or thinking, and I used to complain when I caught him. So this beer joke had some truth in it, which made it even funnier. In the last part of this presentation, he mentions that the progress I have made is a miracle, and believe me, he knows what he's talking about. This specific recording is probably the best quantum reversal thus far. It all seemed to come together in this recording perfectly, especially in the second half, which you will see in the next presentation. I will be posting this video in its entirety separately after this one so you can hear it again without interruptions.
I think when he goes, I think he's flattered when he coughs like that, eh?
He's happy, that's all.
Yeah, that's not. You know, now, looking at me.